Do you know what the Compromise of 1850 is?
What?
What's the Compromise of 1850?
No idea, bro.
What's the Compromise of 1850?
I mean, it's been a while, Jen. Something to do, something to do with the ending the Missouri Compromise. Slaves in Washington. People getting triggered.
The whole of US history.
Bella? Do you know what the 1850 Compromise is?
That's the wrong answer.
Do you know what the 1850 Compromise is, Charlie? Nope.
Hi, do you know what the 1850 Compromise is? Do you want to know? Well, tough. You have to know because it's in the exam, so enjoy. The aim of the 1850 Compromise was to organise lands gained after the Mexican-American War to appease both the North and the South and their politicians in the Senate. Initially, this was organised by Henry Clay, who offered the Senate a series of resolutions as a basis for a compromise. However, there's problems with getting it passed because you've got both Northern and Southern representatives who all have different views. This set of resolutions sparked many speeches, many debates, many different ideas and different solutions by people, as they simply couldn't agree because there were so many different viewpoints on the stance of slavery. So there's many older politicians who contributed, making their last appearance on the public stage, and then there was also a lot of new younger politicians who contributed, making their first mark to US politics. With every call for a compromise from a more moderate politician, there would always be a Northern or a Southerner speaker who would rise and inflame passion in the Senate, as no one could really agree on this compromise, and there were so many radical ideas, with some people wanting to completely abolish slavery from the new territories, and then people who wanted slavery to be thriving in these territories. So there was really not an easy way to compromise between these two completely opposing ideologies. The bill was defeated on the 31st of July, mainly due to Northern congressmen who completely opposed it, so voted against it. The turning point that allowed the act to be passed was with the influence of Stephen Douglas, because he passed it in component parts by splitting up the bill and submitting each little section of the separate bill. So it meant that there wouldn't be an overwhelming majority who'd vote against it. It would get passed easier. So eventually all component parts could be passed, making up the original compromise. So by September 1850, all the compromise had passed. Can we split Brexit into component parts and pass it like that? The concept. The compromise ended up being passed in 5 separate bills, with the first bill being that California was to be admitted as a free state, the second one being that Utah and New Mexico was to be organised as territories, with no mention of slavery, which would be sorted out with popular sovereignty later on, which is where the territory decides itself whether it's going to be free or slave through the settlers who are there. And then the third part is that slave trading was to be ended in Washington DC, and then a more forceful Fugitive Slave Act was to be passed to replace the old version from 1793, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then Texas was to surrender its disputed land to New Mexico because they had a bit of a border clash, so to get that sorted. And then in return, Congress would assume the $10 million public debt that Texas still owed. So although the compromise finally passed, we can still look at the reaction of different congressmen where Northern and Southern will still have different opinions over what was passed and if they felt they were better off by it. So the South believed that the North had gained more in the compromise, where the entry of California tilted the balance of free to slave states in the favour of free states. Yet the demands of the South were mostly met with the new Fugitive Slave Act, which we'll go on to, as it reaffirmed the legality of slaves as property, which is the most paramount importance to the South. However, the South deeply resented and objected to the criticism of slavery implied by the end of the slave trade in Washington DC. And then Northerners were still concerned with the implication of popular sovereignty in Utah and New Mexico, because it essentially took the power to control slavery in states away from Congress into the hands of the people. The passing of the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act is what really annoyed the Northern abolitionists, as it authorised federal marshals to raise posses to pursue fugitives on northern soil, and if they didn't cooperate, they risked a $1,000 fine for not joining him. The abolitionists clearly resented this, as it meant that the South were imposing their own laws and their own views about slavery on the North and insisting they cooperate. So naturally there was a lot of rebellion to this, as it led to a lot of angry and violent scenes as local people in the North tried to disrupt the taking away of runaways in the free states. And it led to things like the Underground Railroad, where Northern abolitionists became more active in trying to free slaves. Before we finish, it's important to look at how slavery was contained before the Compromise of 1850, which happened with the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which meant no slavery was allowed in the Louisiana Purchase territory north of the latitude 3630. However, this collapsed when new territories were ready to be admitted to the Union after the Mexican-American War, as they now needed a new compromise that would satisfy both the Southern congressmen and the Northern congressmen and the increasing movement of abolitionists.
Thanks for watching.
It's better. I need a new phone. This quality is awful. Can we start a GoFundMe? Thank you.